My CEO fired me on a Friday morning and called me replaceable. What he didn't know was that the entire platform his company ran on, the data engine, the client dashboards, the analytics pipeline, was built on a system I personally patented. And the company's license to use it? It expired on Sunday. I had been working at BrightWave Analytics for 9 years, long enough to remember when the company was just 3 floors in a rented building in Seattle. Back when our biggest client was a local retail chain and our servers lived in a noisy closet that overheated every afternoon. Back then, I wasn't senior leadership. I was just the engineer who stayed late fixing problems nobody else could see. The system that would eventually become Aurora Data Engine started as a survival project. Years earlier, BrightWave had nearly collapsed after a failed acquisition. Our data infrastructure couldn't scale, reports were breaking, and clients were threatening to leave. So I rebuilt everything. Not just patches, the whole architecture. A distributed backend, modular services, automated data pipelines, security layers designed to handle millions of transactions a day. Aurora. That's what we called it. At the time, the CEO, Michael Langford, encouraged me to patent the core architecture. He said it would protect both me and the company. "You built it," he told me. "Your name should be on it." So it was. Aurora Data Engine, inventor, Sarah Mitchell. BrightWave licensed the technology from me under a long-term agreement tied to my employment. Most executives never cared about that detail, until Daniel Carter arrived. Daniel became CEO 2 months before everything fell apart. He was exactly the kind of leader venture capitalists love. Charismatic, fast-talking, always talking about disruption. He wore expensive suits and liked to say things like, "We need to move faster than our competitors," which might have been impressive if he had understood what we actually built. In his first week, Daniel canceled our weekly engineering reviews. He replaced them with something called Vision Alignment Sessions. 3 hours of slides about growth, 0 minutes talking about infrastructure. By the second week, 2 engineering managers were gone. Restructuring, Daniel called it. The third week, he started asking why our back-end systems looked so complicated. That was the first time he called me into his office. "Sarah," he said, leaning back in his chair, "walk me through why this architecture is so layered." Because it has to be. But I didn't say it like that. I opened my laptop and showed him diagrams, data ingestion, processing clusters, API gateways, client analytics layers. Aurora wasn't complicated for the sake of complexity. It was designed to protect the company from failure. Daniel nodded occasionally, but his eyes kept drifting toward his phone. At the end of the meeting, he smiled. "I appreciate the overview," he said, "but I think we can simplify things." Simplify, that word always makes engineers nervous. Over the next month, Daniel started making decisions that felt increasingly reckless. He approved a new product feature without consulting engineering. He pushed deadlines forward by 6 weeks. He told investors we were about to rebuild the analytics experience from the ground up. Meanwhile, the people actually maintaining the system were trying to keep things stable. Ben Walker, our lead platform engineer, stopped by my desk one afternoon. "You know he doesn't understand how Aurora works," Ben said quietly. "I know." "He's going to break something." "I know that too." The meeting where everything changed happened on a Friday. Daniel didn't sit down. That was my first clue. "Sarah," he said, standing in the doorway of my office, "we need to talk about your role here." I closed my laptop slowly. "What about it?" He crossed his arms. "You've been here a long time." 9 years. "But the company is moving in a different direction," he continued. "We need people who think faster." I stared at him for a moment. "What exactly are you saying?" He took a breath like he was delivering something important. "We're eliminating your position effective today." Just like that. 9 years reduced to 1 sentence. I expected anger, but what I felt instead was something stranger. Curiosity. Did he know? Surely someone had told him about the licensing agreement. Surely legal had briefed him on Aurora. I looked at him carefully. His expression was calm, confident, Clueless. No, he didn't know. I stood up. Understood, I said. Daniel nodded once, satisfied. HR would send paperwork, he explained. There would be severance. As he turned to leave, he added one more thing. We need builders here, he said. Not people who peaked years ago. The door closed behind him. I sat there for a long time. Then I opened my personal files. Saturday morning was quiet. Seattle was covered in gray clouds, the kind that make the city feel suspended in time. I made coffee and opened the contract Michael and I had signed years earlier. Aurora Data Engine, patent holder, Sarah Mitchell, license holder, BrightWave Analytics, license renewal date, Sunday, midnight. I leaned back in my chair and laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because it was almost poetic. I didn't want revenge. What I wanted was recognition. So I wrote one email, not to Daniel, to BrightWave's legal department. Subject line, Notice of Intellectual Property License Expiration. The message was simple. Per the terms of our agreement, BrightWave's license to operate Aurora Data Engine would expire at midnight Sunday unless renewed directly with me. Continued use beyond that point would constitute a violation of intellectual property law. I copied legal counsel. I copied the board liaison. And yes, I copied Daniel Carter. Then I closed my laptop and went for a run. By Sunday evening, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers, voicemails, emails marked urgent. I didn't answer. Not yet. Monday morning arrived quietly. At 8:07 a.m., my phone rang. Daniel Carter. I let it go to voicemail. At 8:12 a.m., another call. At 8:18 a.m., a text from Ben. Servers are failing. Authentication layer is down. I smiled slightly. Aurora wasn't crashing. It was simply doing what it was designed to do. Protect itself. At 8:31 a.m., Daniel called again. This time I answered. Sarah, he said, trying to sound calm. We need to resolve this misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, I replied. It's a licensing issue. He exhaled sharply. Come back to the office and we'll discuss reinstating your role. No. Silence. I'm happy to talk, I continued, but not as an employee. Another pause. As what? As the patent holder. By 9:15 a.m., I walked into BrightWave's lobby. The receptionist looked stunned. Employees glanced up from their laptops. Whispers followed me down the hallway. The legal conference room was already full. 3 attorneys, 2 executives, and a stack of documents waiting on the table. Daniel wasn't there. Sarah, the general counsel said carefully, we've reviewed your claim. And? You're correct. Of course I was. He folded his hands. We'd like to renew the license. Good. Under the previous terms. I shook my head. No. The room went quiet. I'm not here to go back to the same arrangement, I said. You're currently experiencing system outages, correct? No one answered. That's affecting client dashboards, reporting pipelines, and internal analytics. The counsel sighed. Yes. Then let's talk numbers. I slid a document across the table. 1-year license, $1.2 million, quarterly renewal, full public acknowledgement of the Aurora patent, and a consulting agreement under my terms. The lawyers exchanged glances. This is significant, one of them said. It's fair. An hour later, the board requested a meeting. Daniel finally appeared. He looked different, less confident, more tired. Sarah, he said stiffly, this has gone too far. No, I said calmly. This is exactly where it was always going. The board meeting lasted 2 hours. They asked about the system, about the firing, about the license. I answered every question, calmly, factually. At the end, one board member leaned forward. What would you do differently if you were in Daniel's position? I smiled. I would have asked the engineers how the company actually works. Later that afternoon, the board chair called me back into the room. Daniel wasn't there anymore. Sarah, he said, effective immediately, Daniel Carter has been placed on administrative leave pending review. I nodded slowly. We would like to move forward with your proposal. The announcement went out 2 days later. BrightWave formally acknowledged Aurora Data Engine and its inventor, Sarah Mitchell, me. The company signed the licensing agreement, and they asked if I wanted my old job back. I said no. Instead, we created something better, a partnership, consulting, and a program inside BrightWave dedicated to protecting employee innovation. A few weeks later, I ran into Maya Torres in the hallway. She was one of our interns. Are you really the person who built Aurora? She asked. Yes. She smiled nervously. That's kind of legendary around here. I laughed. Then learn from it. What lesson? I thought for a moment. Always read the contract, I said. And never let anyone convince you that the things you build don't matter. 6 months later, I launched my own consulting firm, Aurora Systems. We help companies design infrastructure that respects both technology and the people who build it. Sometimes BrightWave calls when they need advice. Sometimes Maya sends me messages about new features she's building. And every time I walk past the BrightWave building in Seattle, I remember that Friday morning. The day my CEO fired me, thinking he had silenced me, when in reality, all he had done was light the match.